Hello, everybody, and welcome to the 247th edition of the Frank and Stan chat. And it's taken a little while, but at last we have got Adrian Bethune on our chat. It's taken a few months, if not a year, I think, Adrian, to make this happen.
Yeah.
But thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Frankenstein. Really honoured to be a guest
Oh,
on your chat.
well, we love that word honoured, don't we, Stan? We love that. That's really playing to our strengths, we
Our
feel.
egos.
Completely. Anyway, how are you today, Stan?
I'm okay. When we talk about what's caught my eye, I'll explain probably why I'm feeling a bit better today than I have been.
Yeah, and also you've had a busy hour or so before this where I think you've had team
Just
meetings
a
and
team meeting, yeah. So it literally there were 3 minutes between finishing the last Zoom
things.
and starting this one. So
Right, Adrian. Well,
Yes.
it's great to have you. There are probably a few people out there who don't know what you do
Yeah.
and how you're managing to make a living and what your past was like and how it got you to where you are today. So, would you mind just giving us a little bit of an overview and we'll chip in and ask
Sure.
questions along the way?
Yeah. So I'll talk about what I'm doing now, and I have one of those portfolio careers, so I do a few various roles. So first and foremost, I'm a primary school teacher and have been for the last 15 years, and I teach part-time at Broughton Community Schools in Aylesbury in Buckinghamshire. And I'm a governor at the school as well. I lecture part-time at Oxford Brookes University, so I was there this morning before our chat
All right,
with
come on,
the.
tell us, Adrian, what was that about?
So
What
today was up. Yeah, I teach a specialist pathway all about health and well-being. So the third year BA Ed students in their third year they choose a specialist pathway. It could be health and well-being that I teach, special educational needs. It could be literacy. They choose a specialism and then they get an assignment after 3 months on that topic, and it contributes to their final degree. So today was the first session. It was an introduction, and it was introducing the topic of health and well-being, what it is, what contributes to it, etc.
So have you found more people are coming to those lectures or those courses now than previously, or
Do you
is
know
it
what? It's
always a
been,
fight to try and convince people
yeah.
this is the area you need to get involved in?
The funny thing is that this is my third year of doing it, and at the end of every year, you pitch to the second years your pathway, and every pitch I've not been available, so I've never been able to do my pitch. Um, but it's been fairly consistent, the number of students I have, I actually prefer a smaller
Yeah.
cohort because you really get to know them, you really get to have some rich discussions, and today I'm really, yeah, pleased. I've got a really lovely group. Everyone chipped in, so I'm really excited about the next few weeks. Um, and then outside of that, I have a little business called Teachappy, which is essentially education consultancy, where I speak about the topics of promoting pupil and teacher well-being, and I do that in schools and insets training. I do it at education conferences, and I have been lucky to go into other countries to speak
Yeah.
about this, which is really exciting. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and also when you go overseas, I think we were talking beforehand that we had a guest on a few weeks ago from Bogota, and some of the issues he was bringing forward were relevant issues. You would have loved the chat, Adrian.
Yeah,
You
I
would have got
listened
on
to
like a
it.
house on fire. Actually, get a sort of booking in Bogota would be quite an interesting development, wouldn't
Okay,
it, for the
yeah.
career? But actually, yeah, it's interesting to sort of see the way that he was really placing a great deal of emphasis on this. So it
Mm.
wasn't just an English issue. It was much broader than that.
Yeah, and even like countries, so I've been to China to speak, and even countries like China that traditionally very academic focused, big focus on education and getting the best grades you can, etc. There's a shift there. There's a shift in other countries like China that have historically been very academic focused because they are seeing you cannot ignore if there is increasing rates of poor mental health in your students and your young people. You can't ignore that, or you can only ignore it for so long, and then you have to really take it seriously. And I think lots of these countries, I've been to the UAE, they're taking this a lot more seriously because everyone implicitly understands, and there's research to back it up, that happier students learn better when you are, when you have good mental health, you're able to concentrate better, you're able to get on with your peers, you're able to form positive relationships with your teaching staff, etc. You just you're able to make the most of your talents and capabilities. When you're struggling with your mental health, it's much harder to do so. It's not impossible, it's much harder. And that leads me nicely into how I even got into this, which was when I was 28, roughly. Um, so this is back in 2008. You can kind of work out my age via that. I went through a period of poor mental health. I was working in the music industry at the time, and I went through a period of anxiety that led to a bout of depression. And I've never experienced anything like that before in my life. It was really debilitating. It affected every aspect of my life. I couldn't sleep properly. I couldn't eat. I lost lots of weight, and I wasn't able to enjoy things that normally brought me joy and satisfaction. And as a result of getting better, or as a result of that experience, one of my main conclusions was, and this has stuck with me, and I can't see this ever changing. It's like a change in how I view life now, is there is nothing more important than your physical and mental health. And so when I retrained to teach in 2010, that stuck with me. It was what shaped what I wanted to focus on in my classroom. Yes, I want to teach the national curriculum, but I also want to teach young children how to take care of their bodies and minds in small, practical ways that I look back and I think I learned this as an adult. I wish I'd been taught
Yeah.
this growing up. And then equally, I noticed that my own mental health, some of those symptoms that I experienced in my late 20s were starting to come back when I first started teaching. I was finding it harder to sleep well at night. I'd sit down at lunchtime to eat my lunch and I'd lost my appetite. But the difference was this: I could spot the signs really quickly, and I was so determined to never go back to that place again. I took action straight away, and that's what kind of kept me on a level playing field. And again, there is good research. You don't have to have a mental health issue, or you don't have a mental health crisis in order to do this. But the research shows that people that have struggled at various points in their lives are often some of the best at looking after themselves now, because they're so determined,
Mm.
and they make mental health and well-being such a daily priority that they're able to, you know, withstand a lot more. They're able to avoid things and certain pitfalls, and yeah, they have that greater awareness.
Yeah. I mean, I personally, I think I said to you before we started recording, had a senior job in government and found myself going back on through Tring, where you
Mm.
are, on the
Yeah.
train, heading north to Manchester, and just wondering, how do I get myself out of this? You know,
Mm.
and actually, I was fortunate to be, well, I don't know whether I was fortunate, but I felt as though I could probably just look for another job.
Hmm.
I found myself in a sort of like a spinning wheel. I remember feeling I'm not able to stop the wheel and not
Okay.
really knowing how I could get out of it. And if I did get out of it, it would throw me away. So the wheel would spin me away.
Mm.
And actually having 2 hours on the train from London to Manchester was like a spiritual experience. Just having those 2 hours,
Yeah.
just not doing anything, but just
Yeah.
thinking about
Like
me, you know?
a meditation, a
It
train
was,
journey
yeah,
You
yeah.
know
meditation.
what,
Yeah,
Fred?
yeah.
I think because I worked a fair distance from where I live in quite a few jobs. And by a fair distance, I mean an hour and a half travel, maybe longer, depending on the motorway. And I found that brilliant for emptying your head on the way back from work. So if your journey was maybe at one was about 45 minutes, by the time I'd got home, all the things that had been playing up here all day, I'd rationalized them. So my home, when I got home, I felt as though that was done now and finished till the next day. And I found those drive homes really helpful.
Mm,
Mm.
And
mm.
I used to whinge like mad, and I've moaned on here like mad about the M62. But the one positive about it was it gave you time. And
Yeah.
I'm no longer anxious when I get into a traffic jam now. I just
I'm worried, yeah, I'm worried about, I mean, this is sort of just revealing now, Adrian, our life at home, all right?
Mm.
So we have got ourselves into sort of fairly clear compartments. So And this developed over the years as the children were growing up. And actually, I think I thought that a fair amount of the distribution of tasks and labour in our relationship and our family were equally distributed, but they weren't.
Mm.
So I had more time for, developing career and focusing on my work. But actually, my concern is around the pressures that are mounting on. It's not female members, but it would have been in our family. But members of who are partners or individuals who are part of a relationship where there isn't that sort of equilibrium in terms of sharing of tasks, and it's as if at times some of the tasks just become overwhelming.
Hmm.
That actually sort of, I think I found that difficult to manage talking to my wife who might be overworked. And actually,
Mm.
when I feel as though my position, well, I thought it was equally shared, you know what I mean?
Mm.
And
Yeah.
actually, it's made me think a lot about, whether or not that equal sharing is also about equal responsibility and also equal emotional attachment to the tasks. And so it's not just about, well, I did 4 hours this, you did 4 hours that,
Yeah.
but it's more around all the other bits that go into those tasks and how it bears on you in terms
Hmm.
of the work that you do, beyond that. So,
Yeah. No, I completely agree. And like you said, my wife and I try and split things equally. Um, but I was reading a book recently. I haven't finished it. It was about the something like
have
the
you chosen
five.
not to finish it because it might have a very disappointing ending?
No, I want to give it the it's a non-fiction book. It's something like the five arguments every couple should have, something like that.
Wow.
But one of it is about the splitting up of tasks. Um, but one of the things it does say is like you need to regularly kind of sit down and ask each other how fair they think things are being
Mm,
distributed because I know that there's some things that my wife does way more than me, particularly our two boys who are 7 and 10. She does more of the admin around school stuff,
yes.
but then I do more of the admin around house stuff. But when you think about it, and I think that that feels equal on the surface, but actually the school stuff is more frequent. You know, once a year I have to renew the house insurance, once a year I have to do the MOT, but actually that comms from school can be very stressful. So yeah, it's
Yeah.
that's the one
But the
thing.
thing for me though was around how these things, as a school leader, being mindful of these issues, I
Mm,
think is really important. And I was really struck by when I was the head, a member of staff had childcare, had a collection for a time.
mm,
And she'd been I only overran the meeting by about 2 or 3 minutes, but she said, I'm going. And she just
mm,
walked out. And afterwards, it was so important to her that she collects a child from the childminder at the agreed time. But
mm.
actually, it really stuck in my head about these meetings got to end. If they're going to close at 4 o'clock, they're closing at 4 o'clock.
Mm.
And that's a responsibility of a leader to make sure that happens. So I've become an absolute stickler for
Yeah,
meetings finish. I won't let them go over, because that's as
I
much
had a
about my failing in terms of I've put loads of stuff into this meeting. I haven't
yeah,
controlled the meeting well enough. But all of those are pressures, aren't they, in
yeah.
terms of the individual? Go on,
we
Steve.
tried to save schools money when we were doing in-service training by um, doing sort of a twilight session because that meant they didn't have to get supply in, blah, blah, blah. And we thought we were being really kind and careful and thoughtful until somebody pointed out that a lot of the staff couldn't go on these twilights because of their home commitments
Yeah.
and children's commitments. And it's one of those things that you think you're going on the right path of doing something that's helpful, and
Mm.
actually, until somebody points out this isn't really helpful at all,
No.
you just don't see it. I suppose it depends on what your life is at the time, what stage you're at. I mean, I can remember
Go
talking about female teachers particularly, and that it's not sexist. It's about having children.
Mm.
To say, you need to think as a leader how their contribution to school may alter, but it won't be because they've stopped. They're not interested. They're not doing. You just got to be aware that there'll be other things that are driving their emotions, and you have to plan for that, and you have to think about, in 3, 4 years' time, they might be back full
Where
time,
they were. Yeah, yeah.
really focused on work. But for a short time, you might have to just accept that, leaving early, arriving on time is something you need to put up with. I mean, the
And
other thing I think that is about leadership, and I thought this before when Adrian was saying something about it. It was a head teacher who particularly used to get there at 7:30 in the morning and didn't leave till about 6:30 at night. And I criticised him on it. And he said, "Well, I don't make the staff do that." And I said, "But you do,
mm,
because you're the example of what
Yeah.
should be done. And when young teachers see that, they think that's the time scale that they should spend in school. And they feel guilty at going home at 4 o'clock and 5 o'clock because you're still here till 6:30 or whatever." And he couldn't see it. He just, no, 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 that's up to them. It's
mm.
the way I choose to
Yeah.
work.
I think
Adrian, go on.
I think where it gets tricky is like when we're talking about kind of happiness and well-being is one of the reasons, one of the labels for well-being is subjective well-being is like it's so personal to us as an individual. And you two are a great example of this in this chat. So generally speaking, research into commuting shows that the longer the commute, the less happy people tend to be. Whereas you've just both talked about the benefit of having a long commute for decompressing to having the time and space to think. But that was very specific to you guys and your situation. But generally speaking, research shows that, yeah, commuting is one of the biggest negative impacts on our well-being. I think only second to or equal to spending time with your boss, according to various studies. But yeah, the whole kind of working hours of, say, a school leader is such a tricky one because you're right. Like senior leaders model expectations
Yeah.
subconsciously and consciously. So we have a responsibility as senior leaders to model, reasonable working hours, etc. But at the same time, that individual,
Yeah.
that might work for them so
Yeah.
that when they go home, they don't do any work and they are fully focused on their family and give them their full attention rather than the head that gets in at 8, leaves at 5, but then they are doing work. Do you know what I mean? And it's
Yeah.
Yeah.
it's such a tricky balance to strike. And there
I
I
is
used
no
to try,
exact formula, is there?
I
no.
used to try not to come home on a Friday until everything was done in school.
Right.
So Friday night, I would usually come home late. And my theory was at the time that would leave the weekend completely free.
Yeah.
Never
Oh yeah.
did.
And
Never,
yeah,
never really worked, but it was a plan.
before we get in, I do want to spend a couple of minutes on Teachappy, but I do remember being asked by the DFE to join a sort of like workshop that they were running around the country on how to reduce workload. And basically, we in the trust that I was leading, we had done quite a bit of work on this. And but one thing we never said was that you can't send emails over the weekend.
Mm.
So we never said that. And the reason why we never said that was because when we tried to introduce that, some members of staff said, no, 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 that's, I'm really, sort of up to it here during the week. I have some time which I've set aside on maybe a Saturday afternoon or a Sunday or whatever, when I can manage that. And so we then started rolling out these workshops, and quite a few schools had introduced no emails after, was it after 6 o'clock? You don't have to. Now, most of the emails did say, accept that you might not be able to respond straight away, all that sort of.
Yeah.
But often sometimes that's ignored. But it was, I think, quite telling that members of staff wanted to be treated professionally and wanted also to have some flexibility in how they manage their workload. They didn't want restrictions placed on them. They wanted flexibility. That's what they wanted.
Yeah. Yeah, and I agree with those kind of policies. It probably suits some people and then it doesn't suit others. And in terms of like the right policy, I kind of feel like people should be able to send emails as and when they like. Obviously, you can also use tools like I can schedule an email. I can
Yes.
write it right now and I can schedule it for 8 a.m. Monday. But then everyone gets bombarded in a very smaller space of time. But equally, the individual has autonomy to choose when they access their
Yeah.
email. I would highly recommend don't have your school email on your phone so you're not getting pinged, but then consciously choose, okay, I've got 45 minutes now just to respond to a few emails, log in then, whether it's Sunday morning before your kids are up or whatever.
Yes.
But yeah, it's
Yeah.
this is, I think, what's hard about well-being in schools, particularly when it comes to staff well-being. We always are generally looking for like the silver bullet or the exact policy to do something, and it's so subjective, and it's you there isn't a policy that suits everyone in every school.
No.
Um,
But it's
and
it's
so
it's if you make a policy and then stick to it rigorously that causes the problem.
yeah,
You agree, for instance, that we're going to try not to send emails during the weekend, you know.
mm,
But if you do get an email or you need to send it, then again, there's some autonomy as to whether I respond to it. You definitely don't have to respond to it over the weekend. But
yeah,
if you want to respond to it, you can't. It's that
Yeah.
flexibility that you have to build into a policy to say, it really leaves you in control of your
mm,
workload.
Yeah.
yeah. And this came out of so end of last year, no, end of 2024. I was asked by the OECD to write a kind of paper on teacher well-being. And I looked at research by two psychologists called O'Brien and Guinea, I believe they were called. I think they were working at UCL, Institute of Education at the time. And one of the things they found was when it comes to workload, it's not obviously there's always a tipping point, but it wasn't really the amount of work or workload per se that stressed teachers out. The phrase they used, it was the nature and purpose of that work. So when the work aligned with their values, aligned with why they got into the classroom, this was going to have a genuine impact on the kids or me professionally, whatever. Teachers, school leaders generally don't really, it's not even we don't consider it like work, but you just get stuck into
Yes.
it because this is important. When the work was, box ticking, hoop jumping, performative, not having a tangible benefit to me or the kids, that is what is soul destroying. And so autonomy, massively important for well-being, purpose, massively important to well-being. So that's, I think, the frame we should be looking at workload through is about purpose. Is this important? Is it meaningful? Is it having a direct or a tangible impact for the children or ourselves professionally? And do you have control over a sense of control over that work when you do it, how you do it?
So that works for the child as well, though, doesn't it? The
Yeah,
way,
yeah,
in a sense, being able to explain to young people or a very small child, a young child, this is the reason why we're doing it. This is what you'll be able to do at the end, we hope, or this will
yeah.
help you do it, and explaining the reasons behind it, as opposed to, yeah, I mean, as opposed to a more direct, this is why we're doing it because
Mm.
this is what we do, sort of thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Something about relationships as well on that. Because I mean, I used to, when we were recruiting or people were asking about my school, I used to say that at some point every day, almost all the staff are in the staff room and they're laughing. And that was literally that's what it was like to work in the school where I was
Mm.
head. And it wasn't me, it was the staff made good relationship. But
Mm.
finding things funny and being able to laugh with each other was a key thing to the staff as a group, and
Yeah.
that never stopped. Even through Ofsted or everything else, we were able to get together and laugh.
Mm.
I've been talking to somebody recently who's had a laughing inset day, where, where
Well,
you have to force yourselves to laugh.
there's a
And one said, "Oh, it was great. We had a great time." And I looked at the head, and he just went.
So, Adrian, just tell me a little bit about Teachappy before we get on to, what's caught our eye, because we're going to run out of time if we're not careful.
Yeah, so Teachappy, what I'm fascinated by is the science of well-being, which can be described as the scientific study of what makes our lives worth living. And a lot of people don't know that, say, Oxford University has a wellbeing research centre, in fact, it has two. Uh, Cambridge University has a wellbeing institute, LSE, Wellbeing Research Centre, Warwick, Birmingham, Glasgow, Edinburgh, and it's that's what I'm fascinated by. And I always, whether I'm reading something or on a lecture online, I'm always looking at well-being through the lens of teaching and education. Like, how can we take this research and how does it apply in a primary or a secondary setting? How does it apply to pupils and teachers? And so that's what I research, what I lecture on, and it's what I write about. Um, and so, yeah, that's essentially what Teachappy is. It's sharing that knowledge through blogs, vlogs. I interview various experts, yeah, to try and make it more common knowledge, and so we can act upon it ultimately.
Brilliant.
And what's the impact? I don't know this is
Well, it sounds like an
Yeah.
Ofsted inspector now,
yeah,
doesn't it, Adrian?
what's the impact been in terms of schools that have listened to you and have you got some evidence that this takes off and makes a difference?
Yeah, well, in terms of personally, Teachappy, what I do have is like a whole load, and I've got like a bank in my emails of various emails and notes from either staff that attended training, head teachers that were considering leaving, and then, heard me speak and they reinvigorated their sense of purpose. In fact, just last week, I had an email from a student that I taught back in 2012, and he's in the second year of university. He just emailed me out of the blue via LinkedIn, actually, and was like, I don't know if you remember me, but, it was just basically saying thank you for instilling him the values of sportsmanship, which was
Oh,
very
wow.
specific, but he's now doing lots of sports at uni, studying business management, and just wanted to reach out and say hello. So, yeah, I've just got lots of personal anecdotes, but then what my work relies on is there are lots of studies around showing that teaching the skills of well-being, teaching about well-being, but most importantly, practicing those skills has a tangible impact on people's mental health and well-being, their ability to learn, ability to attend school, behave well, etc. So yeah, personal anecdotes and
Yeah.
research.
Well, I would love
The
to.
reason why I'm asking him is I can remember having a long and pretty tough discussion with somebody who argued that there was more evidence that children learn better when they're under pressure than when they are happy. And I was saying, no, I think my view was I ran a school where children were happy. They were still
Mm,
academically challenged and we got good outcomes. But I
yeah.
wouldn't like to run a school where children were sort of under fear or challenged all the time.
Well, in terms of the research around this, there is a sweet spot. So there's typically peak performance, peak kind of ability to learn when we experience mild to moderate stress, and if you are mildly or moderately stressed, you can still be happy, right?
Mm.
I think where it goes wrong is when children, and again, there's evidence from the Good Childhood Report that shows
Yeah.
this, when we're overly stressed, when we're fixating too much on grade outcomes and things like that, then our enjoyment of schools starts to decline. Our ability to kind of stay on top of things starts to decline. So there is a sweet spot. Do we want complete contentment with no pressure at all? No,
Yeah,
because would you and I meet our deadlines if we didn't have a deadline? No, because we were like, ah, it's fine, I'll do it
Yeah.
next year. Deadlines add pressure. Pressure gives us a focus, it gives us a motivation you know, and that sweet spot is often called the Goldilocks zone by the psychologists. It's not too hard, it's not too easy, it's just right. And that's kind of what we want to have our staff in and our students in is that sweet spot of just the right amount of pressure that gives us a focus, it gives us a drive, it helps us to concentrate, and then also periods of rest and recovery, i.e., playtime, moments of fun in the staff room, having a laugh, Stan. It's got to be a balance of all of that.
yeah. I just when you say deadlines, I always think of Douglas Adams' And his I love deadlines. I love the sound of them as they pass.
But I'm going to make a management decision here. I hope that the three of you are in favour of it, because we've actually been chatting for over 30 minutes now.
Okay.
So if it'd be all right with you, Stan, can we just go to Adrian's What's
Yeah,
Caught Your Eye this week?
yeah, fine.
Because I know what it is, and I'm particularly interested in making sure that it comes to people's attention. So, Adrian, what's caught your eye this week?
Yes, so I've been reading this book over Christmas. It's called Poor by Dr. Katrina O'Sullivan. She's now a professor of psychology, well, a doctor of psychology at Trinity University, but
Yeah.
the whole book is an autobiography about her growing up in abject poverty, to parents that were drug and alcohol addicts, a really horrendous life growing up. But education features very, very strongly. Certain teachers, put her on the right path, showed her the benefit of learning and changing her perspective. But one of the things that caught my eye is right towards the end of the book, where she's reflecting on her life as an adult, that at various points in her life when things were stable and going well, she would self-sabotage. And this is what she says. She says, if you have ever lived in stress and disharmony all your life, that is the current you tend to go with, even if it will end you in deeper water. In psychology, we call this a set point. It's where we're most comfortable. Once we establish the norm, we're driven to maintain that level, to stay within our normal range. My set point at that time was stressed and afraid. And that made me reflect on teaching and how our set point as a profession is one of very high levels of stress, overwork, and essentially doing too much with too few resources. And I'm starting to share that quote, and starting to challenge this idea when I deliver training or talks. Because the reassuring thing in the book Poor is that our set point it's not fixed. It's where we keep kind of retreating back to, but we can change our set point, which is what Katrina is able to do with support of others, but also awareness. We need to be aware that this is kind of how we're sabotaging ourselves. And yeah, it makes me think of teachers and school leaders. We need that awareness that how most of us are working, the number of hours, the amount of stress we're under, it's not sustainable, and it's not a healthy set point. And we need to start to change our set point. We need to work less, fewer hours. We need to focus on the things that really matter, and we need to not stress and worry about the small things, the noise that gets in the way. And we need to reclaim our lives outside of our schools and our classrooms, re-engage with our hobbies, focus on our families and our friends, because all of that will make us better teachers and better school leaders, you know? So yeah, that's what's caught my eye.
It's so damn easy.
Yeah,
It's so bloody
exactly.
obvious, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
so obvious. We're going to bring it to a close, but I mean, we've spoken about Kerry Hudson's work before, and it's a similar story. And I was saying to Adrian, that's why I started to read or read Poor, on the basis of Kerry's experiences, and it was the fact that the instability in her life made it very difficult for her as a parent to know what stability looked like. So
Right.
she was always, as she became a parent, struggling with this sense of, is this, it's bad enough, I suspect, for all parents to know, is this what you're supposed to do? But for her, that was a very, very difficult position to find herself in, where she didn't have any reliable standards to fall back on. So
Mm.
there's that sort of, she was always feeling as though it was her. In
Hmm.
fact, all she was doing was experiencing, I think, the experiences of a general mother or a person trying to come to terms with a troubled life. But yeah, this sense of stability and knowing where that line is was important for her. So I'd
Yeah.
recommend Kerry's work as well. I'll put a screenshot at the end of this video,
Okay.
so that if you want to follow up on what Adrian's been talking about, you can pick up on it then. That's a Frankenstein chat. And I have to say, the great thing about it is that people like Adrian come along and give their time for free, and Stan and I have a great 40 minutes or so chatting to interesting people. So thank you, Adrian, for your time
Thanks,
today.
No,
Adrian.
thank you. It's flown by.
I know. And yeah, I mean, I'm sure if just look online for Teachappy. We'll put a link again to Adrian's work. And he's obviously available for a variety of things that you may want to engage him with. But yeah, thank you so much for joining, Adrian.
Thanks,
So,
Frank. Thanks, Dan.
so Stan, we'll see. I think we've got another one in a few days' time.
Yeah,
So
I can keep my what's
these are a bit like
caught
London
my eye.
buses, aren't they? Sorry, what was that, Stan?
I can keep my what's caught my eye.
You can, and I can as well, because it still be relevant. But yeah, thank you so much, Adrian, and well, until next time, folks. We'll see you soon. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye bye.
Bye.